Hello again, I'm Todd Aaron Smith. I thought I would try something a bit different today. I had an idea for a mountain scene where the only thing I'm drawing is rocks and mountains, and the mountains are mostly made of rocks. So grab something to draw with and something to draw on, and let's make a great little sketch. I know you can do this because you are an artist. This should be a fun one to do as there is no real way to get it wrong. Let me show you what I mean. Look at this beautiful clean sheet of paper right out of my brand new sketchbook. It's so nice to see a nice white sheet of paper because it makes me think that I can do anything at all that I want with it. I can create anything. Starting off with a blank sheet allows any possibility at all. Somebody asked me what I thought the biggest word in the English language was one time. And I gave it a lot of thought, and I think the biggest word is if, because everything hinges on if. If this, if that. It can be a big word, and it can change everything. So I like starting off with a nice clean sheet and thinking about the possibilities. In this case, I'm going to do some rocks and mountains. What I would normally do in a drawing like this is to decide where the horizon line should be, and then I will build everything that I'm doing based on that horizon line. This drawing is a little bit different though. I'm going to be much more free and loose with this sketch. There's not going to be very much structure to this one. In fact, I don't think there's any structure. It's just whatever I'm thinking of, I'm just going to sketch it out here. The only thing that I'm drawing though, like I said, is rocks and mountains. I could probably make trees and waterfalls and tracks and just all kinds of other things in this picture, but this is going to be quite a bit of doodling for me. You may wonder what the difference between doodling and sketching is, and I don't know the answer. Maybe sketching has a bit more of a goal to it than doodling. Doodling is just scribbling any old thing. And sometimes sketching is doing that too. This sketch that I'm doing now is basically scribbling any old thing. So I'm not sure exactly what the difference is. I'm just going to have some fun in this one and draw it for the love of sketching and see what we can make out of this. I usually try to make my sketches interesting to look at. I do this by having things with a lot of perspective. So I will have some things in the far background, things in the middle ground, things right up close. I think that adds a lot of interest to your picture for people to look at it. I've seen many drawings made by truly talented artists, but I've thought, if they would have just had a better composition in their drawing as they were making this, it would have been so much better. If they could have put something right up close to the viewer and then something way far back in the background. And a lot of artists will just draw everything that they draw right in the middle ground, and that's where everything is. So I like to do things that have a lot of perspective and show a lot of distance. I think that creates a much more interesting sketch. I always talk about this pencil that I'm using. And I can't seem to say enough about this pencil. I'll mention it again. This is called Mephisto. It's made by Koh-I-Noor. And it's a great pencil. It's the best one I think I've ever used. And I love to put down my early sketching on a page with this pencil. I can barely touch the paper and make it an extremely light line where I can see it, but I can make a lot of changes to it as I want. And I'll draw the basic forms of whatever I'm making, and then I can go back over it again. That's usually how I work. I think sketching is building. You start off with some basic shapes and basic lines, and you just build on them, and you build and build and build until you have a finished sketch. I think that is a great way to go about sketching. But this pencil feels perfectly balanced in my hand as I'm drawing with it. So now I basically have the very basics down. I'm going to use a different pencil now. This one is called Toison d'Or. Toison d'Or. That's how that's pronounced. And I didn't know that originally. Somebody had to tell me how to pronounce it because I wasn't quite sure. But that is it, and it's a great pencil, just like the Mephisto. I love to use this pencil. It's a very soft feeling. The Mephisto tends to be a much harder feel to it. You can draw a very hard line with it. But this Toison d'Or is made to feel very soft in my hand. It's a great artist pencil to use. I can get a nice dark line if I want that, or I can barely touch the page and keep it nice and light. But it's a soft feel, and it's difficult to explain the difference between a hard lead on a page and a really soft one. But I love to draw with the softer leads and just love the way that it feels. It's always good to put down my initial lines with the harder Mephisto pencil, but then going over it with my Toison d'Or is just a great way to sketch. It's a good way of going about doing this. I've done this for a long time, and I find that this is kind of my favorite way of doing it. Of course, you don't have to do it that way. You could take one single pencil and work all the way through your entire drawing just with that one pencil, but I love to use a bit of a variety, and I think it makes a difference in my finished drawing. If I look back at some of the older drawings that I've done, and then look back, look at these that I'm doing these days, I notice a difference, and I think it has to do with trying different pencils. I know that I talk about these art supplies quite a bit, but really they do make a big difference. And like I said, it's not a requirement to have good art supplies to create art. You can create art out of just about anything and call it art. And I've used pretty much everything that you can possibly draw with, including office supplies and even ballpoint pens, which I guess that's also office supplies. And I have seen some outstanding work done with office supplies and ballpoint pens. But office supplies and ballpoint pens were not made for the purpose of creating fine art. The tools that I use in my videos were made by artists for artists who understand how to make it much easier to make great artwork if you have quality drawing materials with which to do it. So that's why I use these. I go on and on about this Mephisto pencil that I began with all the time, but I'm using the Toison d'Or now. There's other ones that I love to use. I'll use another one coming up in just a bit here. But there's a lot of good stuff out there, and I don't feel like I need to be stuck just using office supplies to make my artwork. Now that I've discovered some really good art supplies, I want to use those all the time because they are made just for artists, and they're made by people that understand how to better make quality artwork. So once I began using these materials to draw with, I never really wanted to go back to drawing with office supplies again. What I'm doing right now is just going through and making shadows on I guess I should call it the left side of these rocks. I'm thinking that the light source is probably up above and to the right, up maybe towards where the top right corner of the page is. And so I want to make my shadows reflect that by showing that the shadow would be on the opposite side of where the sunlight is, of course. And so that's the way that I'm drawing this as I go through. And as you can see, I'm just kind of scribbling here. My hand really hasn't stopped moving at all. I'm just drawing, and whatever comes to mind, whatever I feel like sketching, I just make another one right there. And just make a line and fill in a little bit of shade. There's no real plan for this at all. I'm just drawing, and whatever I get is whatever I get. I just do it because I love doing it. I'm doing it for the love of drawing. And that's the way that you should do it too. Just do it because you like doing it, and don't worry very much about how it's going to turn out. It'll turn out just fine as long as you love what you're doing. So you can see that as the rocks are closer to us towards the bottom of the page here, they're much bigger and have some more details. And then I've got a middle ground going on up there, and then way in the background I'm going to make those into some mountains which I'll show you coming up. So I'm making some shading as we go. Some of the rocks, I suppose, are darker and some of them are lighter, so it's a good thing to have a variety of them. But see, now I'm working in this middle ground section, and I'm not making the shadows and highlights as big as what I did in the foreground of the closer drawings. And I'm not going too dark on these shadows either. I'm basically just whatever comes out of the pencil with pushing it around with just, I guess you'd call it medium pressure on the pencil. I'm not pushing hard on it. I'm not just lightly touching the page. I'm just, kind of a medium pressure on it. And this is the shade that I'm getting out of it. Now, coming up in a little bit, I'm going to use a much heavier lead that's going to give me much darker shade. And I'm not going to go over all of the shadows again. I don't want to have to redraw this drawing 3 times. What I'm doing is just highlighting what I've already put down and kind of punching out some of the details. So here in this middle ground, I don't know what these details are exactly. I'm just making random scribble marks to create the different sizes of rocks that would be there. And like I said, far in the background are where I'm going to put a couple of mountain ranges, and those will be lighter and have less detail on them. But as we go, I'm feeling pretty good about this sketch. I'm having a lot of fun just working around it and drawing whatever I feel like drawing here. I'll look across and say, hey, this looks like a good place to make some shadow, so I'll do that. Let's work on this hill in the background and see if we can get a little bit of shape and form going on with that. Making some shadows here to indicate some depth even in the far background picture. So just do it however you feel like you should do it. Have fun with it. Maybe the mountain ranges that I just drew have quite a bit of shadow on the dark side of the hills there. And maybe this one over here on the left has some more detail, so I'll make some of my little scribbly marks be a bit more detailed than some of those others. I think I may just go through and fill in this whole hillside with a bunch of shade, as if the sun is possibly wrapping around that hill, but it still has a lot of shade on it. And I'm going to show you a trick to sketching some of this shade here coming up in just a second, as soon as I can fill in the this penciled area first. I'm getting it up kind of close to the rocks that are in the middle ground, but not right up against them. And if you notice, towards the top of the hill, I have my shading a bit darker, and as it goes down, it gets a little bit lighter. I'm going to make a sky here, just a little bit though. I'm not going to do very much about this sky. I'd mentioned I'm only drawing rocks and mountains here, so I'm not going to really do very much at all with that sky or with anything else. Let's see, maybe a few more details. I just noticed down here towards the bottom, I could put a couple of more details in some of these rocks and some of the shading. Now this is just a regular napkin. This is an older one. Here you can tell how much it's been used. But what I do is I just wrap it around my finger and make a point on the end of it. And I work in small circles, just blending out this pencil as I go. And what I'm doing is just blending the shade, and it's smoothing it out. And what that's going to do for me is help it to look like it's further back in the distance. You know, as you see a photo of something where you have something in the foreground, something in the middle ground, and something in the background, the things that are the furthest in the background most of the time are the things that are usually the most blurry. And then the things that are middle ground are less blurry, and the things that are right up close in the foreground are not blurry at all. See, there's what this looks like on the napkin. I find a clean spot on the napkin. I'm going to go ahead and blur the sky, blend it out so that it's nothing more than a shade up here. And I don't have to be very careful with that. It's okay if you can still see pencil marks on there. It is a sketch after all, and it should probably continue looking like a sketch. Even up here in the foreground where I have things that are right up close to us, I'm going to go ahead and blend some of those shapes just because I have some big shapes in there of shadow. I'm going to go ahead and just blend them and make them a little bit softer looking. I don't want the rocks to look like they're blurry in the foreground, but giving a little bit of a blend to the shadows that are in the foreground is a good thing. And then we can always go back in, and we will do this, we'll go back in and punch those rocks out a little bit more and make them look like they're more in the foreground. I felt like my napkin here was getting a little bit too dirty, had a lot of graphite on it, so I found a nice clean place on it again, and I'm just going back over lightly a few of the places. I'm barely touching this paper, by the way. I'm just barely blending it. I want to maintain the shade that's on there, and even some of the sketch lines, I'm glad to still have those on there. But in this background, you want it to be fairly blurry. And now what I'm going to use is this woodless graphite pencil. It's a pretty amazing pencil. It's made by Koh-I-Noor, and it's just amazing. As you can see right now, it puts down a very dark line, and I'm not pushing down hard on this pencil either. I'm not applying a lot of pressure to it. I'm basically applying the same amount of pressure that I have been the whole time with the other two pencils. But as you can see, this one is quite a lot darker than the others. It gives you a wonderful tone, and you can make some great shadows. And of course, like I said before, I'm not going over every line that I've already created on here. I'm only doing some of the highlights of it and really punching out some of these areas where I want it to be darker. And some of the outlines, too, of some of the rocks that are up here in the foreground. I want to put some of this dark pencil on there, too, so that it makes it look, even with the entire rest of the drawing. When I was just a kid, I used to make drawings all the time. I still do that, but that's all I ever did, it seems like. And I kept every drawing that I ever made when I was a kid, and I never threw any of them away. But when I was getting towards the end of my high school years, I decided that I wanted to go to art school. And I found out about a really good school with a great reputation for its illustration program. So I applied for that college, but a major part of the admissions process was a portfolio review. Well, I didn't know what a portfolio should even look like. I had no idea at all what I was doing, and I didn't get any guidance from anywhere. So the only thing that I knew was that I had to show the school admissions people my artwork. So I gathered up a ton of those drawings that I had done and stacked them just as neatly as I could. I slid them down into a black garbage bag and took it off to my appointment with the admissions officer. When I got there, I checked in and I took a seat in the waiting room. As I looked around the room, I saw that there were several other kids that were my age there. They were all dressed up. They had, nice clothes. They looked like they just came from church or whatever, and they didn't have a hair out of place. They just looked really different than I did. They had these expensive leather portfolios that had the zipper around, and inside were plastic pages with just page after page of their artwork perfectly placed in there and on display, really nice and professional looking. And there I sat in my blue jeans and my denim jacket with my black garbage bag underneath my arm. And my heart just sank. I was just this corncob kid who wandered out of the countryside and into the big city. And I'm sitting there looking at my competition for college. And they obviously knew what they were doing, and I did not. So finally the admissions officer came and called my name, and I went back to her office with her. I even remember her name still, and that was such a long time ago. But I pulled my drawings out of the trash bag, and I put them on her desk. She went through the pile individually looking at these drawings, and I sat there and talked about how much I love to draw and how I do it every day. She could evidently see the passion for art that I had, and she did accept me into the college. She knew that art school would be able to take my love of art and the raw talent that I had and give me some direction, so that I could be a successful artist. And that was a big turning point in my life because I went from being this kid who loved to draw but had no clue at all what to do with that to a kid with some solid directions and goals. Has that paid off for me? Well, I worked as an animator on some of the big-name TV shows in the 90s. I illustrated trading cards for quite a few more big-name properties. And then I got to do Major League Baseball cards for the biggest baseball card company in the world, and I'm still doing that today. I have artwork in the permanent collection of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, New York. You can actually go there right now and see it. It's up on the 3rd floor on display. Also on display in that museum are works by artists like Andy Warhol, Leroy Neiman, and even Norman Rockwell. Being a big baseball guy like I am, that truly is one of the greatest honors of my entire life. So you may have little or no interest at all in art college or in animation or making baseball cards like I do, but we do share one thing, and that's our love for sketching. Sketching is its own reward, and we do it because we love to do it. That's why we should do it. That's why you should do it. That's why I do it. And it's a good thing to just let your mind go and draw just for the sake of drawing. So there you go. That is how you can draw some fairly simple rocks and mountains in a fun way. Like I said, there is no wrong way to do that. Rocks and mountains come in every shape and size we can imagine, so make your own world and enjoy the process of being free to sketch anything you like. That is one of the reasons it is so wonderful to sketch. There is no limit to what you can draw, and you can let your imagination go. Because you are an artist. See you soon.